In the summer of 1925, the world's eyes turned to an untamed corner of Brazil. Lieutenant Colonel Percy Fawcett, a celebrated British explorer, was last seen on May 29, 1925 at Dead Horse Camp, in the Mato Grosso region of Brazil. 4 months he had hacked through the vast jungle alongside his son Jack and friend Raleigh Rimmel, hunting for a lost civilization he called Z. With only a final cheerful letter, "You need have no fear of failure," he wrote to his wife. Fawcett and his companions vanished into the Amazon, never to be heard from again. His disappearance sparked one of the great mysteries of exploration. What happened to the man who sought a golden city in the rainforest? This is their story. We will trace the path of Percy Fawcett from his childhood dreams in England, through the hard years mapping South America, to the jungle of Brazil where legend and reality met. It is a tale of obsession and adventure, illuminated by facts from history and colored with the sounds, scents and shadows of the Amazon. On a quiet morning in Torquay, England, a boy named Percy Fawcett was born on August 18, 1867. From the start he was restless. His family was one of Yorkshire gentry, but Percy felt confined by drawing rooms and cricket grounds. At 17 he left the garden of Newton Abbot College and entered the Royal Military Academy at Woolwich, learning to see danger as the most piquant sauce to life. After graduating he served in the Royal Artillery in distant lands like Ceylon, Sri Lanka, where an official handed him a strange map of hidden treasure in the jungle. Young Percy raced into the interior hoping for gold, but found only rocks. Instead of disappointment, however, there was exhilaration. He felt a thrill at every step through foreign trees, a call he could not ignore. As a lieutenant he wrote home of seeing breathtaking sunsets over tea plantations, of nights under unfamiliar stars, and of dreams of far-off cities made of gold and stone. By the time he joined the Royal Geographical Society (RGS), in 1901, Fawcett already counted adventure writers like Arthur Conan Doyle among his friends. Fawcett was no civilian dreamer but a trained officer with courage under fire, just the kind of man Victorian England loved to send into the unknown. Now established as a dashing young officer, Fawcett threw himself into exploration with almost religious fervor. In 1906 the Royal Geographical Society sent him to South America to survey an unmapped border between Brazil and Bolivia. Newspaper headlines hailed the gentleman explorer, who volunteered to resolve a land dispute in one of the most dangerous corners of the New World. Setting out from Rio de Janeiro on a small steamer, Fawcett hacked through the tangled rainforest, pioneering trails where none existed. He braved bones of giant anacondas coiled along riverbanks and felt the nip of piranha as he crossed rushing rivers. He survived clouds of blood-sucking mosquitoes so thick they hid the sun, and disease that felled even his strongest men. Struggle after struggle only hardened his resolve. What took others years, Fawcett did in months, creating accurate maps of the territory. He moved through the jungle as if it were home, oblivious to hunger or pain. The society he represented had expected a year-long mission. He completed it in 6 months. Each night around the campfire he would regale others with stories of exotic ruins and wonders he imagined beyond the horizon. To Fawcett, the endless green canopy was not just wilderness but a mystery to be unraveled. And so the Amazon became his true calling. With each expedition Fawcett fell deeper under the spell of the jungle. In 1908 he set out to find the headwaters of the Rio Verde. The forest fought back. Hungry men nearly mutinied and at one point the party almost starved to death. When Fawcett returned, however, he only bragged that the jungle has literally no law. The hunger and fear just proved how real the adventure was. His tales of misty plateaus and strange beasts reached England's drawing rooms, even inspiring Conan Doyle's famous novel The Lost World. Doyle himself had used Fawcett's reports in writing the story. 2 years later, in 1910, Fawcett led another perilous journey toward the Peru-Bolivia frontier, accompanied by explorer James Murray. The trek was brutal under an unforgiving sun. Diseases struck. Murray fell gravely ill and had to be rescued, mistakenly reported dead back in civilization. Fawcett pressed on alone, but the ordeal left him with a feverish weakness that haunted him for months. Even such hardships did not deter him. If anything, he became more convinced that a grand destiny awaited in those jungles. Fawcett had begun to gather clues from whispered local legends and rumored maps. Every shard of carved pottery or ruined wall he found hinted at the past glories buried in the vines. The dream of an undiscovered city, paved with stones and perhaps gold, now obsessed him. Fawcett's fascination grew in the context of age-old myths. Since the time of the conquistadors, Europeans had fantasized about a city of gold hidden in South America. tales of El Dorado and Spanish reports of kings covered in gold haunted dreams. When Fawcett returned home between expeditions, he studied dusty colonial histories. He found accounts of conquistadors like Gonzalo Pizarro and stories from early explorers describing great cities deep in the jungle. He refused to believe those were just fanciful tales. If the Aztecs fell to Cortés and the Incas to Pizarro, why not another civilization waiting to be revealed? In Fawcett's mind a specific vision took shape. He started referring to a single great city hidden in Mato Grosso as Z. He painted vivid images of it from every report and rumor. His men on a later expedition remembered that when Fawcett saw pieces of ancient pottery scattered among the roots, he exclaimed, "By God, I am right." He told friends that the rainforest floor, littered with fragments of empires long forgotten, was proof enough that sophisticated civilizations had once flourished. In an era when many thought the Amazon could never sustain large societies, Fawcett insisted on the opposite, that complex temples and golden idols lay beyond the forest's edge, waiting for him to find them. In 1914, Fawcett discovered what he considered a tantalizing clue, manuscript 512. Housed in the National Library of Brazil, this 10-page document dated 1753 described how Portuguese slave hunters stumbled upon the ruins of a grand city in the Bahia interior. The manuscript spoke of stone arches, statues and even carved hieroglyphs in an abandoned temple, startling details for an Amazon lost city. It gave no map, only a tantalizing narrative of hidden splendor. Holding the yellowed parchment by lamplight, Fawcett felt a shiver of validation. The findings had been recorded as if from an explorer's diary. Here were veteran adventurers of the jungles themselves, writing of amazing ruins they'd never shared with Europe. Fawcett decided this manuscript city would become a secondary target after he found his true Z. He believed that if he could locate even traces of the city described by the Portuguese, it would prove his theories true and lead him closer to the treasure of all treasures. The jungle walls seemed to whisper, "Go deeper." World War I, 1914 to 1918, pulled Fawcett away from the jungle and plunged him into the trenches of Europe. Even there his mind was rarely on shellfire or mud, but on parrots and creeks. He served with distinction as an artillery officer on the Western Front, rising to lieutenant colonel and winning medals. Yet in letters home he begged to return to Brazil as soon as peace allowed. In 1920, still in his 50s, Fawcett finally had the chance. He assembled supplies and set off alone for the Mato Grosso to find Z. This was a lone man's quest. He rode with only pack mules and a native guide across the untamed heartland. But the Amazon proved cruel. Fever struck Fawcett down. Weak and delirious, he shot his ailing pack animals and beat a retreat to safety. Wounded and frustrated, he returned home empty-handed. And yet he did not waver in his belief. If anything, the jungle had become a living dream he could not escape. He insisted to anyone who would listen that Z would be found one day. By 1924, Percy Fawcett was once again back in Brazil, restless as ever. He had secured backing in London for one final expedition. This time he would bring help. Alongside him would go his eldest son, Jack Fawcett, now 22 and seasoned by his father's own example, and Raleigh Rimmel, Jack's close friend from Devon. Together they gathered lightweight gear, rifles, machetes, crates of powdered milk and canned beef, and even carried a ukulele, which Fawcett insisted would boost morale on lonely nights. In hushed tones around campfires, Fawcett laid out his plan. They would travel fast and light, slipping by any hostile tribes before anyone knew of their approach. He warned there would be no search parties. If they vanished, they would do so without fanfare. Still he remained confident. In a final letter to his wife Nina, Fawcett wrote that he felt closer than ever to finding Z. "You need have no fear of failure," he urged her, embodying the calm enthusiasm he carried into the unknown. The night before their departure, he gazed at the stars over the Amazon's mouth and felt the weight of a world of history on his shoulders. And the thrill of a destiny he believed was within reach. On April 20, 1925, Percy Fawcett, Jack and Rimmel embarked from Cuiabá, Brazil, on the boat Pearl of the Door. They waved farewell to civilization and plunged into the wild heart of South America. 4 weeks the group gritted through stretches of harsh savanna and thorny scrubland known as the Cerrado, where the air was heavy with dust and the sun burned red by noon. Their horses and mules lagged, and in the evenings Fawcett recorded in his journal the smell of scorched earth and the chirping silence after sundown. Slowly, the sounds of civilization faded behind them. The creak of oars of small trading canoes, the distant bark of cattle, the rhythmic chant of townsfolk settling in for night. Ahead lay only jungle. At last they reached the first real rainforests, where every step sank into the loamy ground. Around the campfire the night chorus began, cricket song, the hoot of owls, and the occasional roar of a jaguar in the dark. Fawcett felt exhilarated, as if stepping onto a different planet. In the glow of the campfire, he drew a small map in charcoal on bark, sketching the course ahead. Jack sat quietly tuning the ukulele under a sky of innumerable stars. The journey was slow and demanding. 4 days they trudged through the hot, dry forests of the Mato Grosso, sometimes thigh-deep in mud, sometimes crunching over sun-baked grasslands. Food was scarce, and Fawcett's letters home mentioned dwindling supplies of sugar and coffee. Yet each sunrise brought new wonder, the morning mist rising off a chocolate-brown river, the air thick with the floral perfume of blooming orchids. They spotted brilliantly plumaged parrots wheeling overhead, and tiny monkeys with eyes shining like jewels in the foliage. Not all was beauty. At times, the men encountered shadows in the underbrush that looked like figures watching from the trees. Fawcett's mapmakers noted fresh footpaths crossing their trail, and at one point the party stumbled on a ring of wooden stakes, a makeshift barricade, perhaps meant to warn intruders away. A sense of being pursued clung in the humidity. Fawcett responded with steady bravery. He ordered the men to march on through the dusk light, wary but undaunted. Eventually the dense canopy of rainforest began to clasp around them, and the party prepared to cross the dreaded Xingu River. In late May 1925, the expedition reached the Urua watercourse at the edge of the Xingu River. The Xingu was wide and wild, strong rapids, twisting currents, and an impenetrable wall of green beyond. Local tribes whispered it was territory that could kill anyone they caught. Under Fawcett's direction they built rafts and crossed in stages. In the heavy stillness of the wet season, insects droned and night mosquitoes were as thick as smoke. One evening as they camped on the far bank, a native sent by the Kalapalo people delivered a message. The tribe ahead tolerated no outsiders. Fawcett convened a council by torchlight, the flickering flames dancing in their eyes. He decided to try diplomacy. They had gifts of beads, cloth, and tools, but readiness for flight if needed. Everyone felt tension prickling the skin like steely needles. Jack lit his ukulele and played a soft tune as a lullaby, and for a moment the jungle itself seemed to pause and listen. Fawcett drew in the warm night air, insects humming, frogs shouting their hollow calls, and steeled himself for the next day's encounter. The final camp before the unknown was ominously named Dead Horse Camp. The name came from a local tale that a horse had died there years before, its bones bleached white. On May 29, Fawcett wrote a terse letter home. "We are at Dead Horse Camp. We are ready to go into the unexplored country tomorrow with my son Jack and Mr. Rimmel only." His penmanship was steady. The men had dismissed their local guides. The next day they would push into territory no European had trod. That night, as the fire burned low, Fawcett stood at the camp's edge listening. Cicadas sang in thousands, the air smelled of wet earth and wood smoke. In the flickering light, the explorers' camp looked small and fragile against the endless shadow of the jungle. Fawcett felt fear and exhilaration in equal measure. He knew the stories. Beyond this point lay warlike tribes unknown to outsiders. But he also remembered every lost ruin and every promise in the old maps. Pulling his weather-beaten journal from his satchel, he wrote final notes by lantern light, simple entries about their location and health. He carefully folded the letter for his wife into an oilskin pouch. In his mind, this was not the end but a threshold. On the morning of May 30, 1925, Fawcett, Jack, and Rimmel struck camp and vanished into the forest. No European has reported seeing them since. In the hush that followed, only birdsong and the rustle of leaves filled the space they left behind. Days turned into weeks without word. Back in England, Fawcett's letter arrived on schedule, hopeful, confident, and then silence fell across the nation. For the explorers themselves, what happened next remains untold and unknowable. Did they find the fabled city? Did they meet hostile tribesmen or succumb to fever, thirst, or accident? Historians believe the most likely outcome is tragic. A three-man party was too few to tame the jungle's perils. The Kalapalo people would later recount finding strangers' camps empty, and suggest that a warring tribe may have attacked. Other tales speak of starvation or turning back towards familiar rivers. In truth, the jungle claimed its mystery. Fawcett and his companions stepped into the green dusk and simply never stepped out again. When months passed with no word, the Royal Geographical Society officially declared Fawcett, Jack, and Rimmel lost in January 1927. Thousands of volunteers, missionaries, and expedition adventurers answered the call to find them. Men traveled into Mato Grosso with machetes, cameras, and fever in their veins, combing riverbanks and villages. All returned empty-handed. Occasionally tantalizing clues trickled in. In 1927 a metal nameplate bearing Fawcett's name was found in the hands of a local tribal chief, and in 1933 a theodolite, surveying instrument, from his expedition was discovered near the Bashiri people. Decades later, even Fawcett's own signet ring surfaced in Rio de Janeiro, deepening the puzzle. But none of these finds told the full story. To this day, no bones or letters from Fawcett's last journey have been authenticated. Did he die heroically searching for ruins? Or did he cast aside his old life entirely, choosing the forest as a final refuge? The lack of proof made the mystery fertile ground for speculation. One by one, even Fawcett's staunchest friends began to doubt whether Z had ever existed at all. Yet many admirers felt, as Fawcett did himself, that some glimmer of truth must lie at the end of that jungle path. Stories blossomed in the Amazon. Among the Kalapalo tribe, an oral legend persists of the three strangers who walked through the village asking for food and help, then vanished. Some elders said a rival tribe attacked them for not bringing enough gifts. Others believed the foreigners simply got lost and perished under the canopy. In England and Brazil alike, Fawcett became a name that conjured both admiration and sadness. Writers and filmmakers would later dramatize his fate. David Grann's best-selling book The Lost City of Z 2009, and a 2016 film adaptation brought new attention to Fawcett's quest. Even if no golden city was ever found, his story lives on in the imagination. Schoolchildren learn of Fawcett's unwavering faith, and amateur archaeologists pore over maps looking for Z. In textbooks and campfires alike, one lesson endures. Sometimes the dream of discovery drives men beyond reason, and yet without such dreams, no wild corner of the world would ever have been explored. Nearly a century has passed, but the legend of Percy Fawcett and the lost city of Z remains alive. Historians debate while adventurers still dream. They study satellite maps and ancient stone and wonder if a sophisticated civilization could have once thrived there. Fawcett himself once wrote that his dream was born of hunches and half-clues, and admitted that his last march into the jungle was an act of faith. Perhaps that is why we still care. Tonight, as we dim the lights and let our thoughts wander among the giants of the rainforest, we remember Percy Fawcett not for a map he failed to draw, but for a vision he refused to abandon. His story reminds us of a time when frontiers were truly unknown and a man could walk into the green twilight with nothing but hope as his guide. The Amazon remains in its own way an unexplored heart, and in that hush Fawcett's whisper endures. Without dream there is no wonder.